Well, it's not just been the politicians who've been travelling around the country. For the past 5 weeks, our People in Politics correspondent Nick Martin has been visiting communities all the way from Cornwall to the Western Isles, speaking to people about the issues that matter to them. And I'm very pleased to say he's back in from the cold and he's in the studio with us. Nick, thanks for coming in this evening. And just for those who might not have seen, just give us an idea of what the purpose of your reports were, because it wasn't about the politicians. It was about the politics, but not the people that implement them.
Well, we started by rolling out a map on a table, looking at the British Isles and saying, where do we want to go in what direction and what are the stories that we want to tell? And I've spent 3 or 4 years talking about Brexit. So we parked Brexit to one side as much as we could. And we looked at all of those big issues that people tell me about all the time. You know, as you know, I spend my life outside of Westminster, talk to people across Britain all the time. And these big issues like family life, juggling work and childcare, poverty, housing, knife crime, who looks after us in our retirement, you know, how can we afford a house, drugs policy, all these things were swirling around. So we set a course from Cornwall all the way up to the Western Isles in Scotland to try and look at some of these big policy issues, really.
Let's start with, I think for many people who have seen it, was one of the most powerful bits of journalism you did when you were examining the issue of homelessness. Tell us about that piece.
So we went to Weston-super-Mare. You know, it's a seaside town. I was brought up in a seaside town. There's good and bad in all seaside towns. And we wanted to look at homelessness, but not just homelessness, perhaps through the prism of policy. What has perhaps gone wrong in policy that leads up to the homelessness? And I spent about 3 days on the streets with charities, just talking to people who were sleeping rough. And one name kept cropping up, and it was a guy called Tom. And people said, you've got to try and find him. He was disabled. He was born with spina bifida. He was double incontinent. He couldn't decide when he could go to the toilet or not. And he'd been sleeping rough for 2 years. So we set about finding him, found him eventually in the pouring rain. We sat on a park bench and we had a chat.
Your medical condition makes it very difficult, does it?
Yes, it does, yeah. Because especially in the evenings when everything's closed, where I would need to use a loo normally, that does make it very, very difficult for me. But I deal with it as best as I can, to put it basically.
Do you think society should be looking at you and saying, you shouldn't be on the streets, you need proper care?
Yeah, in a way, yes, I do. There are a lot of times where I don't want to be blunt, don't want to be here, but you just kind of got to get on with it and just take day by day, which is what I do. I try and just take every day as it comes and don't look too far into the future and just do what I can to keep myself going and survive and eat and sleep and whatever else.
I mean, you can't help but be moved by that. I mean, and his was, I mean, a situation as almost as bad as it can be imagined.
We had a huge reaction to that story. He is not defined by the lack of housing. No. He's not defined by his homelessness. He's really been filled by welfare, housing, social services, local government, you name it, social care. And the thing with Tom is he has very specific needs. Now, after that piece was broadcast, thousands of pounds were raised for Tom, about 12 or 13,000 pounds. And the two people who raised that have been trying, with me as well, I have to say, over the last month, to try and figure out how his situation can be helped. Tom is still on the street tonight. This night, he is still on the streets. And the problem is that no one really, as far as I can see, has been able to come forward and address his two main issues, his homelessness and his need for care. And if there is an agency out there who thinks that they can help him on those two things, then I would invite them to contact me and we'll try and sort his situation out.